This is a recording about how to determine if a thought is from God. So this is falling under the assumption or the belief that there is a God and that people have something called spiritual experiences, which is where essentially God directs them or communicates with them in some way that I don't fully understand. So these experiences are, I believe, from God. Some people believe that they're not from God. But these kinds of experiences, whether or not they're from God or not from God, are often mistaken for something that I call pseudo-spiritual experiences. And I want to differentiate the two a little bit for a second. So, first of all, the question is how to determine if a thought is from God or if it's a spiritual experience, okay? So, people will say, all right, I had a thought, and I'm not sure if it was from God or not, okay? So, that right there is kind of the giveaway. I'm just going to follow this track. Well, they'll say, well, I don't know. You see, this thought, it just randomly sort of popped in my head. I was going down the street and I saw a rock in the road and I thought, hey, someone could trip on that rock and they could fall down and they could die. And I'm thinking, since I had that thought, maybe that thought's from God. And I said, well, could you get the thought out of your head? If you couldn't get the thought out of your head, it must be from God, right? So that's sometimes something people use. Well, if the thought stays in your head and you just can't get it out of your head, then it must be God telling you to move the rock out of the road so nobody would trip over it. And they're thinking, well, I was thinking about the thought, and I was thinking about how much I love my family, and I was thinking about how I love other people. And so thinking about this thought about moving the rock to keep people safe, it just really made me feel peaceful, felt really peaceful thinking about moving this rock out of the road. And when I moved the rock out of the road, I felt peaceful after doing it. In fact, I felt a lot of love for my family, and I was looking at this rock and I was just feeling this love. And I was like, wow, God must really love me, and my family must really love me to help, protect my family by giving me this random thought that popped in my head and that I wasn't sure whether or not it was from God. And or they say, I acted on the thought, and just 30 minutes later, and one of my kids was running around outside, and they ran near the area where that rock was, and they didn't fall down. And therefore, I know that the thought must have been from God because nobody got hurt when they're outside. Or I felt like I should move the rock out of the road, and then 30 minutes later I didn't do it, and 30 minutes later someone actually tripped on the rock, fell down, and they scratched their knee. So that means that God told me to move the rock, and I didn't obey God because something bad happened because I didn't follow this thought, this random thought that popped in my head and I couldn't get out of my head. That's kind of the inverse of the same thing. Or they say, this is actually a mistake. So, sorry, rule that last one. Get rid of that one. That's a mistake. So they think these things, and therefore, what's the conclusion? I say, the giveaway was right here. Right up here. This part in particular. I am not sure if it was from the Holy Spirit of God or not. If you have a thought that pops in your head and you're not sure whether or not it's from God, I don't believe it's from God. Because when you have an experience where you feel the Holy Spirit of God in the moment that you're feeling it, it is unmistakable. You know it's from God. It's called having an assurance. And that assurance is unmistakable. Now later, sure, you can doubt things, when you're not having the experience. But while you're having it, part of the experience itself is this absolute assurance. You know it's from God. It's just as plain, or actually more plain, than if someone's sitting next to you talking to you. It is absolutely unmistakable as the Holy Spirit of God while you're having the experience. Later on, sure, you can question things, you can have doubts, whatever, all kinds of things like happen after the experience. But during the experience, unmistakable. And so if you feel, if you have a thought and you're trying to determine whether or not it's from God, the way you can determine it's from God is, did you feel the Holy Spirit of God, which is unmistakable? And if you don't know what that is, then you have not felt the Holy Spirit of God before in your life. I'm sorry to tell you that, but you just haven't felt it, because it's like not knowing whether or not you can hear or you can see. It's that plain. So if you're not sure whether or not a thought is from God, if you're not sure, then it wasn't from God. This is why you're having the experience. And if you are sure, then it was from God. And if you are sure and you know what it is, you've accurately experienced that. Some people are like, oh yeah, I had a thought and I'm sure it's from God. Well, yeah. So anyway, that's how you know if it's from God or not. So all this other stuff, all these things popping into your head, can't get it out of your head, thinking about it made you feel happy, or acting on it, something good happened, that doesn't mean it's from God. This is what means it's from God. Hope this video is helpful for somebody. Goodbye.